My name is Angela Stefano Zimmer. I am a writer and editor here at the museum, and I'm hosting tonight's 16th Louise Scruggs Memorial Forum. So the series began in 2007 as a way to honor the legacy of pioneering artist manager and booking agent Louise Scruggs, whose understanding of music and musical trends, coupled with her formidable business acumen, helped her steer the career of her husband, Earl Scruggs, to ever wider audiences. We have her grandson, Jamie Scruggs, in the audience with us tonight, so hi to him. If you haven't been to one of these before, each year we profile another strong, intelligent woman who has played an essential behind-the-scenes role in bringing the world great music. And in the case of this year's honoree, home two national institutions, the Ryman Auditorium and the Grand Ole Opry, for more than a decade. A few of our past honorees are here with us tonight as well. Hello to Kate Clary, Lorianne Crook, Phoebe Evans, Nancy Shapiro, Denise Stiff, Sarah Trahern, and Kay West. So now it's time to meet our 2024 honoree, Sally Williams. She's the president of Nashville Music and Business Strategy for Live Nation Entertainment, and she spent more than 30 years in music and entertainment. She began promoting concerts while attending the University of Missouri-Columbia, and she worked for multiple booking agencies and concert promotion companies before joining Gaylord Entertainment in 1999. Sally managed and produced concerts and other events at Gaylord venues until 2007, and following a brief stint at the Country Music Association, she became the general manager of the Ryman Auditorium in 2008. In 2017, Sally was named Opry Entertainment Group's Senior Vice President of Programming and Artist Relations, as well as the first woman general manager of the Grand Ole Opry. Sally took her current role at Live Nation in 2019, which is the same year she began managing the band Old Crow Medicine Show in partnership with Red Light Management. She's an Academy of Country Music Award winner, including the 2015 Don Romeo Talent Buyer of the Year and 2010 Promoter of the Year awards. She received the T.J. Martell Foundation's Frances Preston Outstanding Music Industry Achievement Award in 2019, and she was named one of 10 trendsetters in Nashville Business Journal's 2023 Power 100 list, among a whole other list of honors. She currently serves on the board of directors for the Country Music Association, the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, the Nashville Downtown Partnership, Nashville Public Radio, and other boards. And before she joins me, I wanted to note that the Gibson J35 acoustic guitar that's on stage is a gift for Sally from our friends at Gibson in recognition of tonight. And I'd also like to say thank you to our friends at Red Light Management for their support of the pre-program reception. And please help me welcome Sally Williams.
Before I sit down, I brought a visual aid, just in case. This was given to me by kind of a former business colleague. It says, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, will Sally remember the saying? So I think that's super important for everybody to keep in mind through tonight. If I stumble, it is not unusual.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I should also probably note that we spent like 6 hours of having conversations and preparing for this, and I already know that I budgeted more time than technically the program is, so we're probably gonna keep you late. We're a little sorry, but not that much. So I think we start at the beginning. Sally grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri, And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your childhood, some of your early interests. Were you a creative kid? How did that go?
So I'm an only child. My dad is here, which is awesome. And when I was growing up, there was music in the house, but it was not like music fanaticism, right? But I was always encouraged to be as creative as I wanted to be, and we would go to church, and I would sing in the choir, and I was around people who were performing. So as a kid, I started getting interested in music, and I grew up out in the country as an only child, and I was very lucky in that. Sorry, that's production, no. I was really lucky in that my parents were always my best friends, but there was a lot of alone time too. And so my imagination got to kind of take shape. Isn't that supposed to be on there so I can watch it?
Yeah, we were having a little bit of trouble with the
I'm going to keep turning around.
Monitor down here, so we might be turning around
That's
a little
my mom
more
and my dad, by the way. So anyway, I started kind of making believe, and I started writing, and when I got into, I wasn't necessarily a joiner in the sense of like, let's go be in a sorority, but I was a joiner in the sense of I want to be part of communities. So I started, just doing things where I could be around other people, and a lot of those were around creative endeavors. So I will say that when I was in grade school, I won first prize in an art contest because it was a collage with construction paper, and I ran out of one color brown, and so I had to use a different color brown for this angel's hair. And I won because I was probably in, second grade, and the teacher was so impressed that I had thought about the texture of her hair. So, I wanted to be creative, right?
Well, yeah, you told me in high school you did the lit mag, you did the yearbook, you did the newspaper, you did plays, you did all these different things.
Yeah, I wanted to be musical. I don't know, I think I must have, at puberty, my voice must have changed, because I think there was a time when I sang pretty well, but that ended when I was in high school, because in grade school, I sang in a little operetta, and I played the saxophone, and played the piano, but it just never was, it was never my forte. Mm-hmm. Through all of that, and I acted, and that was more about being with a group of people. That was about the ensemble, less about me and creative expression. But through it all, I started writing, and I wrote in every way that I could. I did write poetry in the literary magazine. I edited the yearbook. I edited the newspaper. I wrote a little book. That was where I found my creative place.
And
and this.
Yeah, we were talking about this one specifically.
This one is so interesting because I feel like I feel the same thing. Sorry, I did it again. And I think somewhere in here, it talks about how of the 222 JC students surveyed, the number of tomorrow's adults who really don't care where we're headed in the future is unfortunately low. And it's like, well, no wonder we're where we are. I learned that when I was in high school.
I think you'll start to see that there are themes that we'll get to in a minute from Sally's early life that keep cropping up, that being one of them. Before we talk about that story and some more musical stuff, we do have a clip of a play that Sally was in high school. Do you want to introduce it? It's the Terror by Gaslight one.
I think I was a drunk maid or something in it.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure.
Much.
What's interesting, and I keep doing that, sorry. What's interesting is that the star, the male lead, I guess the homeowner, I don't really remember the play, but is a guy named Tom Talbot, who was a good friend, who is now like the head of epidemiology at Vanderbilt. So he's the guy who got us through COVID. And you'll see, I don't know what it is. You'll see that he didn't treat Jen Hester all that well.
Yep.
Oh, God.
Here she is, Doctor, the naughty girl. You haven't had the pleasure of your company for some time, Jen Hester. Go on, the doctor won't bite you.
I ain't been feeling too good. Had to visit the ocean. Fresh air and quiet. I like the sound of gulls.
Is that why we haven't seen you?
I'm better now.
Perhaps I should examine you. Otherwise, you might be hearing the sound of angel wings. Won't you step inside?
I didn't tell that young gentleman, Doctor, nothing.
You said you did. You're
thinking it. I can tell by the way you're looking at me.
Sit down. Sit down!
Yes, sir.
So clearly, I was not meant to be on the stage.
But I know that, like you were saying earlier, music, you were in a musical household, even if you weren't necessarily playing it. And I know you have you kind of remember the first music that you remember hearing.
I do. I remember the moment. And I know that I heard music, but I remember the moment where I identified with a specific song by a specific artist. Again, I found all these 45s recently, and I found one of them is the Dueling Banjos from Deliverance. I've actually found that this morning. And so, there definitely was music. But there is this, I have such a strong memory of being in bed in Lexington, Missouri. I can remember the bed, I can remember the window, I can remember the clock radio and hearing Willie Nelson. And it's so pivotal because Willie has been like this glue or this through line since then. And turned out, he was my mom's favorite artist, which is why I think that stuck out so much. But it's so interesting I must have been maybe in first grade, maybe second grade, and it's just clear as day.
And so if you want to explain this, I think this is a cool story too.
Yeah. So this was when I was living in Minneapolis in '93. So I had graduated from college, and do you remember I can't remember the name. I had put, there's like a casino amphitheater someplace out of Minneapolis, and I was working the show because I was working for a company called Jam Productions, doing assistant work. And I thought this was when my mom met Willie for the first time, but I think that might actually be wrong. I think she might have met him at the Ryman, but I certainly met him. And clearly, it was important enough to me that I get him to sign a photo from my mom. So it was, I was pretty proud to be doing something that would, give her something that would make her happy.
So let's talk about the memorable concerts that you attended when you were a kid. I know we talked about there was New Order at Red Rocks, things like that, but there's a U2 show in particular that, again, we will refer to fairly often throughout tonight.
Yeah, I think my first I think I actually might have seen Stryper in the Christian metal band, as I was thinking about it, in a gymnasium of a church in Jefferson City. And I remember thinking, I can't claim this as my first concert. I can't. But the one that I claim is In Excess, which my parents took me to in August of 1986. It's hard to believe that it was so long ago. That was important, and I loved the band, and it started me out on the path of loving the live experience. But the show that really was pivotal, or I think probably the pivotal show, was U2, the Joshua Tree Tour, at Kemper Arena in October of 1987. And I went with a group of friends. Actually, Tom Talbot, the epidemiologist, his father drove us there. And great show. The Bodines opened, terrible seats. It didn't matter. I was in an arena, and the energy was insane. And for that tour, and you can actually listen to this. We can't listen to it today, can we?
Listen to it today, no.
You can listen to this on the Live at Red Rocks album. The last song on that is a song called 40. And it ends, it's from Psalm 40. And it ends, how long will we sing this song? And that was the last song that they sang. And they went off stage, and they probably got on their bus and were on a plane before anybody left. But that refrain continued not only after they left, but it continued as all the people were leaving. And we got to the car, and we were still singing it, and all the people getting into their cars were still singing it. And I went through, whatever puberty stuff, and I can't sing anymore. I wish I could. I wish there was somebody who could sing that. And it was this absolutely communal experience that I hadn't had with that many people. It was 14,000, 17,000 people, not led by Bono at that moment, led by their shared experience of this amazing concert. And I feel certain that not everybody in that building agreed with one another on 100% of their beliefs, but all of them were singing that song. And I just remember so clearly that was my first feeling of, being together at a live event can wash away a lot of stuff and bring us together.
And you, I guess it would have been a few years before that, you were sort of harnessing the idea of live music sort of being a key thing in your life and important in bringing people together through this story that you showed me that you wrote. I think it was about middle school, we decided.
Yeah.
Do you want to, I have a quote from it that I think, again, really sets the tone for sort of going forwed.
Yeah, and that was less about, that was before I'd ever gone to see a concert. I was, there it is.
I did not get to read it, and
yeah,
I'm sorry, you don't either.
Nor have I read it, because I'm afraid I would be horrified. But it doesn't matter. Those are two notebooks full of my writing, and it was influenced because I loved Duran Duran. I'm sure a lot of the women in this room who are somewhere in my age range might have loved them as well. But what I think this book was about me going out and exploring with a friend, and it required me to use my imagination in a way that was super fun. And I can remember reading about things. It entailed travel, and I remember reading about going to Japan and Stratford upon Avon and all this stuff. I think I carried these notebooks around. We would go out to eat, and I would be writing in the notebook, and it was a great creative outlet for a probably 10-year-old, 12-year-old, something. So
There's a quote that she did let me read that's on that page that's what did we call it? A note from the author. I forget exactly how it's.
It says a few words from the author about herself, her book, and life in general.
That was it. Oh, awesome. Thank you for fixing that.
Oh, look, there it is. You'll all relate to this if it's about life in general.
So the quote was, "This is the first story I've ever written, but I know that it won't be the last. Writing for a living, I realize, probably won't make me a millionaire, but I think that before money, a person should be happy with what they're doing in life. Writing is something that makes me happy. I can be anything and do anything when I write." So that leads well into, you originally started as a journalism major in college. And why journalism?
I wanted to write for Rolling Stone. I mean, I had identified the truth that I couldn't actually perform music, but it was important to me. And I mean, my friends and I would spend, the weekend at the music store, and we would devour all of the music magazines that we could find, and we would watch Saturday Night Live, and the thing that I knew that I could do was write, and I wanted to write for Rolling Stone, and that meant I needed to get a degree in journalism.
However, you got to college.
I did.
And that didn't quite pan out.
So early. There was an inflection point early, although I didn't know it at the time. I mean, it was, starting with Striper or NXS or wherever that was. I lived in Jefferson City, Missouri. It was between St. Louis and Kansas City. I could go to shows, pretty frequently and easily, and they weren't as expensive as they are now. And so I went to orientation before school even started, and was walking about and meeting people, the chess club and the, whatever, student government, and I stumbled into the section that was the Missouri Students Association, and I stopped at a booth or, a table, and it was the college music committee, and I said, "What do you do?" And they said, "Do you like live music?" I was like, "Duh." And they said, "Well, we do concerts." And I was like, "Sign me up." Oh, there I am in my office. I said, "Sign me up." And that was the beginning of it all. I had the good fortune, so I bought talent and promoted shows. I actually went back and looked, and there was it was a 30 or 40 member committee, and the chairperson was just not in it, and kind of got fired. I mean, they were not paid positions, but she was not showing up, and it was my second semester, and even though I was a freshman, I was like, I think I can do this, because I didn't know any better. And so I started chairing it my freshman year, and once it was fascinating. I was like, this is a business. Like, I had no idea. For those of you, my CMA team and the Live Nation team, there are people out there today that don't know that this is a business, but back then, you couldn't go to music business school. So to learn that there was a business in it was incredible, and I took it really seriously, and I went to the University of Missouri-Columbia, which is one of the greatest journalism programs in the country, and it is no BS. If you go to the MU journalism school, you are in it, and there's nothing else you can be doing. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep promoting concerts. And so when it came time for me to declare my major, I decided not to do that.
And you, I know, mentioned that, so the moment that you kind of took over the head of the committee, you had a woman named Kathy Murray who was pretty pivotal in kind of helping you figure out exactly what you were doing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about her and sort of how that went?
She was the advisor of the Missouri Students Association. And, oh, there she is. I went into her office with a notepad, and she taught me everything that she knew. I asked her questions, she gave me answers. I learned what an agent was and what a contract was and how to market a show and how to budget a show. And every step of the way, she would encourage me and answer my questions, but she wouldn't do the job for me. And so her involvement was huge, and she was open to things. I mean, I was really involved with an organization called the National Association of Campus Activities, and we would go to those conferences, which was great, but she took me to South by Southwest. I mean, she was so invested in my success. I mean, not just my success. Of course, at the time, I thought it was, all about me, but I mean, that was her job. So much so that later, later I thought about doing what she did, because she was so important to me. And I certainly learned more from her than I did any professor.
So you switched majors
I did.
To
the poor man's journalism, which is communications.
that was a good one, sorry. But so, you were saying how you got to be involved in this program and this committee, and you were there at a time where the concert industry was pretty young at that point.
Relatively.
And
yeah.
so you were telling me sort of about some of the, the things that you guys as students were working and were allowed to do that probably would not fly today.
No. I mean, it was, back then, concert promoters were all, oh yeah, Cinderella with Winger. Concert promoter, it was all, it was wild, wild west. There weren't a lot of templates. We are a much more templated business now. And part of that is so funny. I actually also saw Cinderella at Red Rocks the night after New Order and the Sugar Cubes, which was quite a shock after the show before. We were buying talent and promoting shows, baby bands, in our student union. And then, this is when I started. And then actually, we started buying bigger shows after I got involved, which this was my favorite show. Actually, my dad, I think, was at that show. We started buying shows on our own for our theater, but then we were also working arena shows. And it was such a good deal for the promoters. I mean, anyone who has anything to do with live music, we should go back to this. We as students were working security. And not just like, hi, can I check your pass? But we were barricade security without earphones, or earplugs, by the way. I'm sorry, Brad. But we did that. We were runners. We were, the promoters and in general the business got away with things that we just don't. I mean, liability is such. These are some other shows that we did. It was a great time. I'm so, there was no program, there was no textbook, there was no template, but there was hands-on experience if you were willing to wake up early and go to bed late. And that, it was amazing.
Well, and you were often, you said, the only woman in the room, or the only woman kind of on that side of things. And did you notice it at that time?
I did. I'm not a real, I don't suffer fools necessarily very well. So I was never in a situation where it was weird. Early, I was not. People were pretty respectful because, I'm a business. I was very serious. Kathy, my advisor, she expected professionalism. And I think I knew that as a woman, if I wasn't professional, if I let that guard down, all bets were off. So I always felt like I gotta be first on and last off, and I gotta be serious, and I gotta have the I's dotted and the T's crossed. So I didn't really, I noticed it later when I started seeing other women, and I was like, that's right. You know, I don't.
Oh, I know, it's sort of you've still experienced that sensation throughout your career even. I know, as you got into the Opry specifically, like we said earlier, she was the first female GM of the place, and I know that came with some challenges.
You know what? I have to look to see who's out here. Well, Brenda's here, Pete is here. I mean, yeah. We've come a long way. My favorite, really, I don't thrive on making people feel uncomfortable, but it's kind of cool sometimes. So there's a long history, and Brenda, you can just yell out corrections on this, please. There's a long history within the Opry of the Opry Hunt. Anybody familiar with the Opry Hunt?
Your dad's laughing. I feel like he knows this story.
Yeah. It's cool, A lot of my belief about the Opry is it has to be a community. And so every year, there's one thing that ain't like the others there. So every year there's a hunt. I don't hunt, but I like to hang out. And I think traditionally, Brenda, it was hosted by like one of the members, right? And then it became, anyway, I think, what? Yeah, but who hosted it? It doesn't really matter. Yeah, and okay, so, thank you. So then it became sort of the general manager's job to sort of, and Pete's in here, he's been to a lot of hunts, and I was all of a sudden the general manager. And so my assumption was that I was gonna go on the hunt. Because that's what the general managers do. That was a really interesting conversation, which was really about discomfort, not mine. And it was about, I think, sort of the myth of dudes sitting around in their underwear drinking beer and cussing. Which might actually have been happening at one point in time, but doesn't happen anymore. That was a real touchy thing, but clearly I went on the hunt and was told later that I actually was a lot cooler than was expected. So, and also I thought about this. No, none of those guys caught anything, killed anything, whatever you do. However, I fished, and I caught enough fish for the chef to fry fish for our appetizer at dinner. So, it's interesting. I think maybe there is an expectation that the only time women have issues is when they're coming up in their career, and I've encountered it more the sort of as an executive, as a leader. Which is I think makes kind of sense because we're still growing leaders, right? And so it'll take a little while.
Well, suddenly you're the one in power, and that, I think, forces people to reckon with it more than someone who, reports to someone or something like that. While we're on the topic of kind of very interesting work stories, if we can bring it back to college, you obviously, we already talked about, weren't only working shows at your school while you were in school, but in addition to that, during summers as an intern, you were getting jobs with promoters and people in the area. Yeah. And you have a pretty interesting Guns N' Roses one.
I do.
I think we should let a news story from early July of 1991 set the scene, and then we can talk about it.
I don't know if I've seen this.
In just 15 minutes, the scene at Riverport turned from a concert to a riot. More than 60 people, including a dozen police officers, were injured. Some received broken bones. It took more than an hour and 400 police officers to get the riot under control.
This was as bad and as violent as any as I've ever seen, and I've been involved in several of them, and this was as bad as any of them.
The trouble started at about 11:15 last night, 90 minutes into a concert by the band Guns N' Roses, seen here in another performance. Lead singer Axl Rose apparently spotted someone with a camera in the audience, and when the camera wasn't confiscated, Rose went in after it.
Axl got in a fight with some guy, and then the security guard pulled him apart because they were afraid, and he just threw down the microphone and left.
He said, "Your security is lame, I'm going home," and threw the mic down, and of course broke it because it was real loud.
After the band left the stage, concert goers say the band's security came out and began fighting with the crowd.
He jumped on my back, he started choking me, in which instance I started pushing him away and he started punching me in the face.
Then the riot started. An estimated 2,000 people began tearing up Riverport, ripping up chairs and destroying brand new sound and video equipment.
They were tearing out entire rows of chairs, throwing them on the stage. VIP chairs were going on the stage. They were tearing half the stage down. They had speakers were going out into the crowd.
While security guards and some policemen were on the scene, they could not control the violence. And at 11:28, Maryland Heights police declared a riot, known as a Code 1000. Within minutes, up to 400 police from all over the area descended on Riverport. 16 people were arrested, some for inciting the riot. Members of Guns N' Roses were not arrested. It took dozens of ambulances to take care of all the injured.
A lot of people were carried off in stretchers. 3 or 4 of our security guards were carried off in stretchers. It was just unreal.
So where were you during all of this?
Well, once it started, I mean, I think I was out in the, this was at an amphitheater, clearly, and I think I had been out in the sort of breezeway between the seating area and the lawn, but when it started, I made my way backstage, and they got us all into one of the production offices and kept us there. It was quite frightening because they would open the door and members of the staff would come in and covered in blood. And I remember, I think maybe the summer before, I had been in just a minor fender bender, and I had called my dad and I had said, "I've been in an accident." I'm okay, I've been in an accident. And he was not happy with the fact that I told him I was in an accident, and he thought something traumatic had happened. Turned out it was only a fender bender. So I knew, call your parents and tell them you're okay, because it was bad enough, and the timing was such that it was going to be out on the news immediately. You know, it was such, it was so different than that U2 show, right? It was what can happen when people gather, as opposed to what can happen when people gather. And this was just, I mean, what was so sad about it was this was either the second or the third show of that amphitheater. We had just opened it. And so, I mean, it didn't take us long. It wasn't the worst it could have been worse. I mean, people could have gotten killed. But how funny is it that Axl Rose is still touring with Guns N' Roses in the age of cell phone cameras? And he was so mad about that. So it really, there he is. It made me understand that this really fun business really had to be taken seriously.
So who were you working for at that point?
I was working for Contemporary Productions, which has since become part of Live Nation, but at the time was an independent concert promoter that worked in the Midwest. And I did shows with them in Columbia too.
So can you kind of walk us through college, working with them, to your sort of getting to Nashville permanently? There's a bunch of different jobs in here, and you're back and forth between Nashville and a couple places, and kind of give us that story real quick, how you got from here to there.
So I'll give it really quickly. When I was in college, I interned both for Contemporary Productions, but also for a company called Proton Productions, which was a small booking agency in Minneapolis. I didn't want to live in New York. I didn't want to live in LA. I wanted to live somewhere where music, where I loved the music, where music could be part of my experience in the community. And I loved Minneapolis, and I loved Austin, and there was a lot happening in Nashville that I loved as well. When I graduated, I moved to Minneapolis. I got a job as a booking agency while also working with Contemporary and Jam on some projects. Realized I didn't want to be an agent. It was really too far removed for me. And so I decided I wanted to get my master's in higher education and go back and do what Kathy Murray did for me. I was working with a couple of artists that needed some specific things that I could give them from Nashville. One, a band called the Floating Men, who were located in Nashville and needed a publicist. Remember, the poor man's journalism came in handy there. And then this a cappella group from Canada called the Earth Tones that I had been booking into colleges. Oh, look, there they are. And they needed somebody to manage their US tour, not from the road, but from an office. And so I was making money from them, and I was able to move to Nashville. I got a job at the YMCA. I think, yes, there you are. I got a job at the YMCA so I could actually meet people. The Y has always been important in my life. And I enrolled at Vanderbilt, got an assistantship, was all ready to go. But then my boss, from who I had worked for as an agent, a guy named Kevin Daly, who was another great mentor, called and said that the William Morris Agency was looking for an assistant. For whatever reason, they couldn't find one. I should go and check it out. I said, I don't want to be an agent. That's why I left you. He said, it's the biggest agency on the planet. Go check it out. I did. It was working for someone who was already my friend, so I deferred and am still deferring my master's. I went to work at William Morris, and it didn't take me long to realize I still don't want to be an agent. And Kevin called. He was selling his company to go out to Monterey to work for an independent promoter in Monterey called Monterey Productions, or Monterey Artists, or Monterey Peninsula Artists, I don't know. Anyway, and they needed somebody to run he was selling the company, and they needed somebody to run that part of the business. And so they hired me. I moved back to Minneapolis a month after I started dating Brad Bissell, who is now my husband, and lived there for 2.5 years, which was awesome, and I learned a lot. I promoted a lot of great shows with another of my mentors, Sue McLean. This is us with Chrissy Hine at a great show at Midway Stadium in St. Paul. I started producing festivals. And Brad and I kept dating, and eventually I figured, you know what, this is the real deal. I wanna move to Nashville and be able to be with Brad all the time. 2.5 years of long distance was long enough. And it just so happened that there was a job open at the Ryman Auditorium. And I don't think I told you, but one of the shows that I did at Jesse Auditorium, I was actually with one of the Contemporary Productions employees, and we had walked up into the catwalk and we're just looking. Did I tell you the story?
No.
It doesn't matter. We were just looking down it was before the show started, and he said, I think I was probably maybe a junior at that time, and he said, what do you think you want to do when you get out of college? And I said, here I am in this great old theater. And I said, I think I might want to work at an old theater someday. And then this Ryman job comes up, and I'm like, okay, I can go back, I can be with Brad, and I can go work at this really cool theater and do musical theater, because at the time that was really all the Ryman was doing, and an occasional concert. And so I decided I was gonna move, and I started working it. Brad was working it, my friends at William Morris were working it, gotta get that job at the Ryman. And I didn't get it. And I was already moving. And so I moved anyway. My friend Allie Harnell, who may or may not be in the room, she was at Pace Concerts at the time, and she knew that I had been producing festivals. And she hired me to produce Nashville River Stages, which was a festival here in Nashville for a while. And that is how I got to that point. Long story, sorry. Yeah.
So the story obviously has a happy ending in that you did make it to Nashville. You ended up at the Ryman.
I did.
A while later. But you also met Steve Buchanan.
I did.
And he, I know, has played a pretty key role in your life and career. Can you tell us sort of about how you two would work together later? How he sort of became like that person for you?
Yeah. I ended up at the Ryman. I ended up producing a bunch of events for the 75th anniversary of the Opry. I had to meet with Steve in order to get that job, and he was a little scary. And a lot of people have said that about him. But he ended up being, I'm a collaborator. I mean, that goes back to living out in the country was awesome, but we weren't part of a community. And so I longed for that. I didn't know I was longing for it, but I'm best when I'm part of a team and I have a partner or partners. And he just ended up being that person for me. When I was at the Opry for 7 years-ish, working with Pete Fisher, doing special events, and actually everything on that complex. Oh, that's a good one. Everything on that complex at the A-Cup Theater and the Opry Museum, and except for the Grand Ole Opry. And I did it for 7 years, and it became a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I made the decision to leave, and I went to work for the Country Music Association for about 1.5 years. And the day that I left, Steve said to me, "You will be back." And 1.5 years later, he brought me back to run the Ryman. And he brought me there to run the Ryman as though I was an entrepreneur, to grow the business, to look for extra or new revenue streams and business opportunities. And every step of the way, I felt like I had a partner.
We shouldn't gloss over that first Opry stay completely, because part of that was doing the plaza parties. early on, starting with,
They were fun.
you started with the 75th anniversary ones.
Yeah.
And so what was that like to sort of, that was kind of one of your first major things to really get
Yeah.
put in there, and you are in charge of booking and programming and doing the whole thing for them.
Yeah.
And what was that like, I guess, not necessarily having come from a country background,
Right.
and, getting
Yeah.
to know that?
Well, so I created these Opry Plaza parties. All of those, those were my bands, right? Those were the bands that I loved and love. And it was actually every Friday and Saturday, I think in the first year. Anyway, from Memorial Day to Labor Day. But then the decision was collectively made. I was like, let's do a festival. And we made the decision to do 3 festivals that summer. And the festivals, because we could gate the Opry Plaza, and the festivals that we decided to do, I use we sort of, I'm not sure I actually decided this, but it was bluegrass, Southern gospel, and clogging. And I really, despite the fact that I had the Dueling Banjos 45 in my rear view mirror, I didn't know that much about any of those art forms. And so I had to learn. I knew how to produce an event. I knew how to, negotiate to get an artist to come play, but I didn't really know. I mean, Bobby Cutt is here, and Bobby schooled me, and John Hartford schooled me. But the big schooling for me was going to Merle Fest. I'd always heard about, for a while I had heard about Merle Fest, and I thought, well, I can go to Merle Fest and I can learn about, all the roots. At that time, Americana was not a thing. This was Americana. I can go and I can learn, and I'll bring back that knowledge to book these festivals. And what I brought back was one of the greatest things that has happened in my career, and that was a relationship with a band called the Old Crow Medicine Show, who I stumbled upon at just playing in the middle of a field. That's the moment that I discovered them at Merle Fest, and I brought them back, or they came later, and that was 24 years ago, and there you go.
And so they played those parties a few years, I think.
Yeah.
But among the other people I know we talked about who played was Nico Case, and you have quite the story about that particular booking, I know.
Yeah. Does anybody know the Nico Case story? I know Dan does, because I called Dan. So I loved Nico Case. My thing with Pete was that I would consult with him on the artists that I booked on the Friday, because the plan was those artists Pete would put on the Opry. That was the only involvement that I had in booking the Opry. And that gave a good story to what we were doing on the Opry Plaza parties. And then on the Saturday, I would book an artist that I hoped I could get Pete to come out and watch, so that they could play the Opry the next time they came around. And I loved Nico Case. And so I booked Nico Case on a Saturday. We would book 90-minute sets. The stage faced the sun. It was not, if it was hot, it was really, really hot. But Nico came, and she was kind of foul from the moment she touched down. And it was hot. It was really hot. And she was complaining, and we were doing everything that we could to take care of her. We got her water, I think we even gave her we tried to give her a t-shirt to put on, because she didn't want that. And, we did what we could, and she took the stage and played for about 45 minutes. And then she came off stage. And my assistant at the time called me on the radio. I was on the other side of the plaza and said, hey, you should come over here. Nico came off and it doesn't sound like she's gonna go back on. And the way that we did 90 minutes so that we would catch the audience coming to the Opry so that they could get a little bit of warm-up music, and then the people coming out of they were double shows, the people coming to the first show, the people leaving leaving the first show, coming to the second show. And so I needed her to keep playing, and so I approached her and I said, Nico, you got another 45 minutes, really need you to play this. And she huffed away, and I thought, okay, I think we're good. And then she went back on stage, and she took off her shirt, and this is in front of the Grand Ole Opry, and she had on a lace bra. You could see it all. And she started dancing around like this, saying, I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble, in her brassiere. And we turned everything off. I ran to front of house. We turned it all off. We got her off stage. We paid her her money. I told her, Nico, I'm such a big fan, and I really was hoping that this would lead you to the Opry, because she had talked about it being an important part of her life. Her grandma or whatever listened to, and then fortunately there were no press people there. I mean, the Opry is it's still not the most progressive body, but back then it was a lot more conservative. And so we got through, nobody noticed. I mean, maybe Lisa was there, I don't know. And then we started hearing about it. And she put out Blacklisted, and she wrote about it. And there were, articles talking about the contract-wielding Opry staffer banning her from the Opry, which is not at all what I said. And it was another good lesson in, careful what you wish for, and also, careful how you represent yourself. So that's the story with Nico Case.
Clearly it wasn't a career ruiner.
It was not. I props for the retelling the story. I wouldn't have ever thought about it again, but.
So you eventually, a few years later, make your way to the Ryman, briefly via the CMA. Yeah. And you are still on the CMA board. Not on the CMA board. I'm sorry, guys. I just had a total brain fart there. You did spend a fair amount of time on the CMA board.
I'm still on the CMA board now. I was not on the CMA board when I worked for CMA. I think I'm now we've actually have somebody who was a board member who is now on staff. I think I might be the only person who was on staff and is now on.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that one.
That's okay.
Well, so, you did stay at the CMA as an employee briefly, but you are still a board member.
Yeah.
So, despite the short stay, I know that organization is still very important to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's been about a dozen years now that I've been on the board. And I was chairman and president, breaking a bit of a dry spell because there hadn't been a female leader of that board for 20 years. And now there have been several, and they're kicking ass. Steve, the other thing that Steve encouraged me to do, which was just busted the doors down for me, was to get involved in the community. I mean, he encouraged that. And it has been such a blessing for me to be at CMA. I mean, especially with Sarah, who is one of my dearest friends, and really thinking about what's best for this community. I think Ralph Schultz is here, and I gotta say that being on the Chamber of Commerce board has been the same kind of honor. I feel like this community has given so much to me in general, but especially as I kind of have lived through my mom's illness and recent passing. This community, there is nothing like it in the world. I can't imagine that anybody could argue with that. And so to be able to be focused on what's the best thing for the community is a blessing.
I wanted to make sure you did have some time to talk about the CMA. I know the stay as an employee was brief, but
yeah.
Well, that one's on your desk.
Put them on. Put them on.
So let's talk about the Ryman, because that's the next place you go.
Yeah.
And so you were the third woman to be the head of the Ryman, after Lula Naff and Pam Matthews.
Yeah.
And so how do you see, how did what they did influence what you did, and how do you see you sort of carrying on their legacy?
Yeah, I mean, two badasses right there. I mean, Lula managed that building basically for 50 years. So, I mean, she was a badass, but also, I'm sure, slightly insane. She was fierce. I mean, she managed that building when women couldn't vote, when I don't think they could own property. And to be able to look up to that was really valuable to me. Pam came from just prior to joining the Opry, or the Ryman, she had been working in management and was a CPA and just so smart. And again, sort of no nonsense, just like Lula. She believed that the Ryman could be more. When Steve was really instrumental in the Ryman renovation and reopening, and he wanted to establish an identity for the Ryman that was very separate from the Opry, and so there really weren't any Opry shows there, but the park was still open, and so there was a lot of a lot of series shows and a lot of musical theater and all really good stuff. But I mean, Pam saw the potential in terms of contemporary concerts. And so she, along with really Allie Harnell, who at the time she actually was still with Pace, and then Pace turned into Live Nation ultimately, and she left for AEG. But anyway, they busted the door open for me to come in, and just following their footsteps. That Ryman was the Union Gospel Tabernacle, and it was open. Originally, it was meant to be a place for a lot of different beliefs, people with a lot of different beliefs to worship, and then ultimately it became this place where there were events for all kinds of Nashvillians. And I subscribed to that, probably even a little bit more than Pam did. I believed and believe in the all are welcome programming philosophy for the Ryman. I believe that even though it is owned by a publicly traded company, I believe it belongs to Nashville. And I believe that anybody who wants to be able to go out and experience music or comedy or theater should be able to do it there, because there isn't a more special old theater or theater period in the world.
And you mentioned that U2 show, the sense of community as sort of a thing that you kind of kept coming back to. in booking the Ryman and trying to create those experiences for people.
Yeah, I mean, and at the Ryman, that sort of community, it's impossible to avoid it. Steve wanted to get the capacity as high as possible, and so the pews are unforgiving, right? And so when you're at a show at the Ryman, you are touching your neighbor. We talked about, I went to punk rock shows. I mean, and at punk rock shows, everybody's sweaty and everybody's touching each other and they're, mosh pitting. And I mean, it was just that energy. And the Ryman is made for that. Because there is this intimacy. I mean, it's like going to church, right? Between your neighbor, between you and the performer on the stage. So lots of experiences like that U2 moment.
Who were some of the favorite people that you booked? I know we talked a little bit about like Wu-Tang Clan being the first hip hop group in 2019 to play.
Yeah, and that was a big thing for me because I was not achieving the all are welcome. My buddy Darren Lashinsky, who's home with COVID, I was not achieving the all are welcome because, we'd never had hip hop or rap. I mean, I left, but the big regret for me was that I really didn't get any traction on Latin music, which is now, I mean, Live Nation is beginning to really get into that, which makes me happy. Probably my favorite show was the third night of Mumford & Sons. That was a real important time because it was 3 shows. The only other artist who had done in modern times, who had done 3 shows was Keith Urban. And it was a really special sort of, I'm not 100% certain that tickets were sold to it probably, but this set up what we really started building for the Ryman, which was that it's a place where, come to the Ryman and play multiple nights, and it'll be a different experience than going to an amphitheater or an arena. The last night of that, and again, I was already on this parallel path with the Old Crow Medicine show, but the last night of that show, they actually had Old Crow come out during the encore, and they sang Wagon Wheel. And this was at the early part of Wagon Wheel, when you didn't hear it as much. And I have to say, I'm really grateful that you all hear it a lot. But it was so cool to have, the last of 3 nights and this band that I loved and kind of thought maybe I had something to do with bringing to Nashville. They were singing their song a cappella in the Ryman. And those moments, those a cappella moments at the Ryman, there's nothing like it. Also Tom Jones. I mean, there's so many, but Tom Jones.
But the Mumford one's a good example of, we talked about, you really seem to lean into being able to market what is so special about the Ryman and get people to, buy into having multiple nights be a special thing. The stage replacement having sort of a whole marketing thing around it, the remodeling, all of that. It seems like you were very big on making sure that story was told in a way that made people want to come and want to play there.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that about anything. I believe that we make connections with whatever businesses we have by telling stories that will resonate with people. I'm so sorry. For the Ryman, I didn't want to take for granted that people knew how special it was. I mean, when I started, maybe there were 40 or 50 concerts a year. I mean, we had a lot of growing to do. And I wanted to make people feel like they were part of something really special. And so, we told Brian Wagner is in here somewhere, and I remember the tour of the Ryman billboards, which incidentally I've been seeing again. Is Brian still here? Hi. It was all about telling this really special story so that people would feel connected. I feel the same way about the Opry. And you can't take for granted. You want me to tell the Weird Al story?
Oh, I would love it. That's a good story.
So people, probably most of the people in this room have been to a Ryman show, and you have heard the artist fawn on about the Ryman. People kiss the stage, people weep, they talk about their heroes, so much stuff. And we had Weird Al Yankovic there, and the first time he was there. And Hatch, thanks to the Hall of Fame for taking such good care of Hatch, Hatch show prints are a great way for the Ryman to tell their story. And so we used that a lot, and we had Hatch prints, and there are Hatch prints in the catering room, and it was as important to me that audiences feel a part of it as artists. And so Al was a history buff, it turns out, and so he took the whole tour. Brian might have given him the tour, and he got up on stage, and you knew it was coming. You knew the emotional, and Charlie Chaplin played there, and so, you knew it was coming. And he said, I was able to take the tour today. This is such an incredible building, and my heroes played here, and you're just, okay. And he's like, there is a Hatch print in the catering room of Hoobastank. That was the story. It was super funny when he said it, because you're like, oh, he's going to mention Charlie Chaplin, or he's going to say he's the biggest Dolly Parton fan, but he made the joke about Hoobastank.
You mentioned making sure that the Ryman was special for the artists as well as the fans. And I think you did that at the Opry as well when you got back there in 2017. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of how you again, programmed that and made sure that fans saw something different, but also that you could get artists to want to come and want to play and want to be members?
Yeah. I was part of a great team, and I was part of a team that I had been with off and on for years. And I think we thought the same way, and we believed, and I know Dan and Gina and the rest of the team believe, that it is critical to create a relationship early between the Opry and artists. And that means a lot of different things. That means you got to know a lot about a lot of artists, because there are no two artists that are the same. But we started celebrating Opry debuts. I think we debuted 125 people in the couple of years that I was there. And we wanted every one of those artists to walk away feeling like they were at home at the Opry, so that they would want to come back home later. So we did a lot of that. The Opry is this beautiful, challenging, complicated thing, right? So.
Are we allowed to expand on that at all? You can say no.
No. You ask me questions.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, so I did find it. It is 125 Opry debuts and 8 inductions. But you started the Opry at Bonnaroo, and got new outfits for the square dancers, and working through.
That's one of my favorites. So I believed also that the Opry needed to get out, and they are continuing to do this, get out into places where music fans were. And I mean, when I was at the Opry the first time, we did 2 Opry tours. So we did things, we did 2 Opry at Bonnaroo shows, which were so fun. And I know I know there were people who were in the audience who left saying, I'm gonna go check that out, because look at all these cool artists who are on that show that they might not have known about. So again, it's about storytelling. Opry Next Stage, which is still going on, but in a little bit of a different format, I think, was all about trying to provide value specifically to labels and managers on artists that they were trying to develop. Use our storytelling to try to be helpful, and again, to create value so that as an artist continues with their career, they always have a connection to the Opry.
When you had at least one reintroduction with Bobby Bare, can you explain? I know most people know, but obviously Opry membership, the way that it works, has changed over the years.
I can't explain it. Dan, you want to come up? You want to come up, Brenda? Opry, at one point in time, there were pretty hard and fast rules for what you had to do to be an Opry member. And it meant playing at times when you might have needed to play someplace else to make money to pay your band. And when the Opry moved from the Ryman to the Opry House, that was kind of that was a struggle for people. People loved the Ryman. There were some who wanted to get rid of it and were ready to go. But, I love Bobby Bare so much. And he started playing the Opry again, but he wasn't an Opry member. And again, I can't explain it, but I started working with his team, and we ended up inviting him to come back and be an Opry member, and he was totally surprised and pretty happy, I think.
We could show clips all day from Opry debuts and Opry memberships. I know we're running late on time, so we won't, but if you want to go look, the Opry YouTube page has a lot of these up, and it is a very sweet clip. You're the one to present him with his member statue, and really, it's very clear that he's very touched at the gesture.
Cool. It was cool.
So you do eventually, in 2019, decide that it's time to move on. What made it the right time? Why then?
It was a variety of things. I felt like, so there was a point in time where I was doing this panel, and I think it was for the Nashville Business Journal or something, and I think it was on tourism, and I was introduced, just mistake, the guy just made a mistake, and he introduced me as Sally Ryman. And it stuck with me clearly, because this has been a long time ago, and I thought to myself, but I'm not Sally Ryman, actually. And this isn't my company. Even though I was hired to be an entrepreneur, and I think I achieved the mission, which was to grow the business and grow the affinity and grow the relationships and grow the goodwill and grow the team. But the reality is it's not my company. And I just, I started thinking, I don't think that this should be the last thing that I do, right? And so I became open to the possibility. But I knew that I wanted to continue to do good things for this community. And I had the opportunity to, that was my last Opry show. I had the opportunity to go to work with Live Nation, which was important. The reason why it was such a good opportunity was because they were ready to grow their presence in Nashville. And we have. I mean, when I started with the company, there were 60 people in an office, and now there are 140. And we're doing, I mean, the team here, I can't believe they're awake. They work so hard. So it was a good opportunity for me to have a positive impact on this community, because they wanted somebody to come in to help them be for Nashville what Nashville needs, and I wanted to be able to help them do that. And that was the impetus for that. And then there was the simultaneously happening.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, you know, after, again, growing on these parallel paths for so long. I mean, Old Crow, you know, they came to Nashville to busk at the Plaza parties, and then they played the Opry for the first time, and it was at the Ryman, and I was there, and then they started playing the Opry, and I booked them on the Bluegrass series, so they played their own show at the Ryman for the first time, and then I was there when they were invited to be Opry members, and I was there when they became Opry members, and then they started playing every New Year's Eve at the Ryman. I mean, and selling tickets. I mean, it was a good business decision all the way for me to be in business with them, and you know, we became friends, right? And they left. They parted ways with their manager, who had been a friend of mine. He was the first person that I stayed. He let me stay at his house when I came here the first time. And they asked me if I would consider managing them, and I told them no. I said, I've got something else I'm gonna do. And they asked me again, and they asked me again, and I love them, and I love what they do, and I think the world is better because they're in it. And so after like the fourth or fifth time they asked me, I thought, you know what, maybe I can do this. And I said, well, what if I were to do it in partnership with somebody? And they said, whatever it takes. And Live Nation agreed to let me write that into my contract, and I went out searching for partners, and Old Crow had been on ATO Records, and I feel really fortunate to say that Corin Capshaw is somebody who I adore and consider a friend, and Tom Lord was my leadership music study group best friend, and so we ended up doing a deal and now co-manage Old Crow, and it's such a huge blessing all the way around.
Especially, I know during COVID, we talked a bit about how you were obviously new to Live Nation and also new to being their manager, and then COVID happens, and you were fortunate enough, because of your involvement with Old Crow, to get to be around live music and be in that creative space throughout the pandemic.
Yeah. I was never not around live music, because we started in April. Catch Secor had the idea of doing a variety show, streamed variety show, and we started doing that. It was called Heartland Hootenanny, and we started doing it in April. We ended up doing 31 or 32 weekly episodes, and we filmed them at a studio or a building that they bought right before, thanks to Corey, who found it, bought a building, converted it into a studio, and we did that, and it was so much fun, and we had, I mean, for, you know, the first however many episodes we streamed, I mean, we didn't know how to do any of this stuff, but I think we, I don't know, Skyped in special guests, and then ultimately we had the special guests come in, and I mean, we ended up making 2 records during that time too in that studio, which which is cool because I'm really comfortable in the live space. And I feel really great to be around a group of people at Live Nation that are so good at what they do, and they're so lovely to work with every day. But that's my comfort zone, and all of this Old Crow stuff is way outside my comfort zone. So it's been fun to be able to learn something new, and it definitely was a lifesaver during the pandemic. And probably good for Brad because it got me out of the house.
So what's next then?
You know, it sounds like I need to write a book, because the little girl who wrote the book, you know, in whatever 3rd grade, said that that was not going to be her last book.
We might actually be allowed to read this one too.
Maybe not, but we'll see. You know, I want to continue to do new things. That was looking after the Ryman was amazing, and managing the Opry was such an honor, but there were so many other things that I did while I was at the Ryman and the Opry. I mean, we birthed the Hee Haw musical, which became Shucked. I worked with Ken Burns on, you know, on his whole project. I mean, we did, Nashville came, which is why we have so much traffic, came about. And we produced, you know, international tours. I mean, there was just a lot going on. So I thrive on getting to being innovative. My dad told me when I was a little girl, as long as you don't hurt you or anybody else, go give it a shot, try it. And that has been important to me my entire career. And so, you know, I want to continue to, and then I really, social impact is important to me. I mean, I have always believed that wherever I was, I want it to be better because I was there. And so I want to, you know, I just went through Leadership Nashville, and it was energizing and exciting, and also very frightening because we had a lot of problems going on. And I knew that, but we drilled down on it. And so I want to figure out how to be impactful. I mean, I've been John, who is the CEO of the Middle Tennessee YMCA's, is here, and he was in my class, and I've stalked him about wanting to be involved in the YMCA's because they are doing such huge. It's not just about swimming, which I do a lot there. The impact that they are having in our community is so significant, and I want to be able to continue to do that sort of thing. So. I mean, I don't know. I have to say that this process has been, especially coming on the tail end of my mom passing, has been so, I mean, talk about bringing someone to an inflection point. Not that inflect is going to happen necessarily, remember this, but reflecting on life through all the boxes we went through and everything that we talked about, and especially coming at this time has been really very fascinating. You know, I mean, I read the articles that I wrote when I was a little kid, and or a high school student, and it's like I gotta act on some of this stuff.
I think before we go, there's one more story I want you to get to tell, the Jimmy Fallon one, that I guess you said not a lot of people know, and this goes back to your time at the Ryman.
Do you have the photo?
I do have the photo.
Because I really just want people to see the photo.
Yeah.
So that is Brian McDonald, and he is a supervising producer for Jimmy Fallon. And he in his hand is a miniature Jimmy Fallon. And he is clearly, as you can tell, holding Jimmy Fallon over the upper balcony, or the balcony of the Ryman. And that is what the set would have looked like this is how close we were to actually getting Fallon to come and do a week of shows at the Ryman. And it's one of those, oh God, darn it. It didn't happen. I think it was budget reasons, but I wanted to, we worked really hard. I mean, Dina, you were involved in that. Butch, it was going to be a big thing for Nashville, and it would have been a huge thing for the Ryman. But I really just wanted people to see how cute that was, little guy. And unfortunately, I talked to Brian sometime later, and they had trashed the model.
Oh no!
I was like, how could you do that?
Oh, I like the roots on the right. Is that what that's supposed to be? I just love it. Yeah, that was really cool to see.
It would have been cool to do.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for sharing that photo, all of the photos, your videos, passes, truly like boxes of stuff we went through. Thank you to, speaking of those, Adam and Samantha, who scanned all of these things for us and got them ready to show Amy and Kaylee and Emily and Ben on our programming team, and to Sally for agreeing to do this and spending so much time with us and making it really wonderful. So, and sharing your story. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to stand up too, because I want to thank you. So many, I look out and it's like this, and you guys should all look around, because we have these opportunities here that we shouldn't let get away. And those are to bring each other together. This community, there's nothing like it. And I am so, so grateful that you all are in my life, and that you're in my dad's life. And I just, there's no words to describe what you all mean to me. And I told you you'd probably be sick of me by the time of the night was over, but I want you to know that I will never get sick of you guys, and I'm so, so grateful for you. So thank you for coming, and thank you.